not in Buddhist countries, but in countries like this or in the United States, oftentimes they think that they see tradition and form and all that as something maybe irrelevant or even an obstacle to liberation or freedom. So sometimes this is I think Venerable Amro has just come back from 4 months in California, where trying to teach in a traditional form of Theravada Buddhism in a country where that hasn't any real sense of tradition, where you have a country like the United States is very much a country based on ideals. It's established around ideas, around ideals, how things should be. So then you find this sense of suspicion and kind of mistrusting tradition of any sort. But you see, in reflecting, like we do, we begin to see we're able to look at both the ability to come from principles and ideals, as well as starting from kind of moral rules or laws or precepts. So you have, say, ideals of freedom on one level. Being free is an ideal we have, and then say we have moral precepts which seem to be another kind of lack of freedom. If we're judging moral precepts from an ideal of freedom, then we see them only as something that prevents us or takes away our freedom, rather than maybe a foundation for freedom. But in the reflective abilities of the mind, then we begin to see complementariness of the opposites, like discipline does not annihilate freedom. In fact, it's the only way to freedom is through some level of discipline and renunciation. But if you're hanging on to an ideal of freedom only, without reflection, then anything that looks like has limitations or that places limitations on you or binds you to anything is an imprisonment or something that denies your freedom. And this is where, say, the wise reflection on the way things are, we begin to transcend the dualistic opposites of the conditioned realm, where we see them as complementary rather than polarized or opposed to each other. It's an interesting time now where, say, we have, say, in a country like this, we have to meet many different religions. It's not like there's, even though, say, the established religion is the Church of England, yet now Britain is a multiracial, multi-religious society. We can see, that Buddhism is not just Asian people. I mean, Asian immigrants are Buddhists, but there are Buddhists from every country. From the Asian Buddhist countries as well as European, American, Antipodean, whatever. There's the Buddhism is something that it has a universal appeal. But then we have traditions that are identified with particular countries, like Theravada with Sri Lanka or Thailand. When we talk about Tibetan Buddhism or Japanese Buddhism or things like this, and this always brings a sense of of it being an ethnic or cultural manifestation. We emphasize the particular, the influence that an ethnic group has made upon the Buddhist teachings. And the quarrels and delusions that form around sectarianism are all around these ethnic differences, not around the actual teaching of the Buddha. So, when we get into arguments and preferences and opinions and views, then that's around the views of a particular ethnic approach or cultural approach to Buddha Dhamma. And in the United States, also the same occurs. We have to deal with various forms of Christianity and Islam, in Judaism. Here in Britain, whenever we have an interfaith meeting, there's always a Zoroastrian and a Baha'i. There's interfaith meetings. You want everything represented, so you get the token Baha'i, the token Zoroastrian. Then there's the Sikh, and then the Hindu, and the Muslim, and the Rabbi, and the Catholic, and the Anglican, and then Buddhism is usually just Buddhism, and they manage to get some Buddhists, whether Tibetan or Theravada. Now these attempts to kind of be tolerant and accepting of other religions amounts to oftentimes what interfaith meetings are. But I see that what I'm interested in is really taking the religious experience, say, within a particular traditional tradition I'm willing to respect, but take it out, but to also get beyond just the traditional limitation of it, to which is the realization of ultimate reality. And when you find dialogues with other religions sometimes breaking down because of very strong views about, very strong doctrinal views that people are attached to and cannot get any perspective on as a viewpoint. They're so attached to the viewpoint, or they feel so obliged to support it, or so loyal to that viewpoint, they can't ever get any perspective on it. So, for instance, one time I was asking myself, this years ago when I was in Thailand, I became very kind of very strong Theravadan in my preference. I began to think Theravada Buddhism is definitely the best. And then I'd read other like Tibetan books or Zen or other things, but always with this kind of critical mind operating, and this sense of somehow committed to proving that Theravada is the best or the purest or whatever. And so then I remember I was in Bangkok for some reason, and I was just thinking about this. I asked myself, you think Theravada is the best, don't you? And then I'd say, yes, I do. But that's an opinion, isn't it? That's a view. And I said, yes, it is. And then I'd look at that. I'd say to myself, Theravada is better than any other religion, any other form of Buddhism. It is the absolute best of the best. There's nothing better. It's the purest and the best. And I keep talking like that to myself until I really see it becomes empty, meaningless verbiage. It's just what it is. It's the ability to conceive the best and apply those particular perceptions to something like Theravada, and it is without it becomes meaningless, a soulless kind of thing. So actually, through reflecting on that particular view, I began to see it as a view Now, the tendency before that was to think I shouldn't. I wanted to be tolerant. So I wanted to think all religions are equal. And that's when you go to an interfaith conference, that's the position you kind of try to maintain. They're all paths to the same goal. And that's a nice view also. All religions are going to the same goal. And of course, that's the tolerant view. And in interfaith, some people like that view, other people hate it. They say, well, we do have to recognize the differences, you know. They're not all the same. And so you get then the tolerant ones say, but there are many paths going to Rome, and they all end up in Rome. Maybe I was a Roman Catholic. But that also is a tolerant view, isn't it? And that this is what I mean by reflection and being able to see things for what they are. It's not saying that they're wrong even, or denying in them any kind of importance or usefulness. But with Dhamma, you want to see things as they are, so at least they're in the perspective of reality, rather than becoming more than what they are. Like when I attach to the view that Theravada is the best, then that's a view that's blinding me, because it becomes something a position I take. If I don't see what I'm doing and I don't realize what's actually taking place when I'm doing that, then that's my position on life. And I'll always interpret every other Buddhist organization, every other Buddhist tradition, in that perspective of Theravada is the best one. The rest are, various degrees below that. And then, of course, the mind has already committed oneself to that position, so therefore you tend to find in any of their literature, anything you hear about them, the kind of things that you're looking for to prove that they are not quite as good as the position that you're in. That's how the thinking mind works, isn't it? If you talk to a born-again Christian, remember trying to have discussions with born-again Christians, these people are totally committed to a view that Christ is the only way. And then one time, this born-again Christian said, he didn't first announce that he was a born-again Christian, he just says, please tell me about Buddhism. So, so I started talking about Buddhism, and he sat there kind of looking quite interested and attentive, and then he began to find little things that he didn't agree with, and didn't like this, didn't agree with that, and I think it sensed immediately he was a born-again Christian. Well, I was right. So he was listening in order to grab to try to prove that I'm wrong, because he's committed to proving that he's right, you see. But that's because his attachment to the view of being right biases and distorts how he perceives or hears or interprets life. So that's what, say, in reflection on Dhamma, we're trying to get outside that whole business of taking sides and coming from positions for or against anything as an ultimate position. So Theravada Buddhism is Theravada Buddhism. And an opinion, if I have an opinion that it's the best, that's an opinion. And to keep things just as they are, it means that they're in a perspective again. They're not something that's going to distort your own kind of experience of life. Because they say the aim of the Buddhist teaching is to liberate the mind from attachment, so that the mind is truly sensitive and receptive to the totality, to everything. to the moment, to the detail, to the totality. It's the human mind then is in touch, connected to or reconnected to ultimate reality, within the restraint, restriction, limitation of human conscious experience. We have to accept that. I mean, we're not like God, knowing everything about everything from the macrocosmic position. No, we have to learn from life from sitting here, from where we are. Wherever we're sitting, that's where we are. It's not like we're, in the transcendent kind of realm of, say, looking down on the macrocosm like God does. We're this creature sitting here in this room, experiencing life from where we are. But we learn not from, it's not the matter of the quality or importance of the details or the conditioned realm, but in understanding the relationship of the conditioned to the unconditioned. And that we can actually do. The conditioned arises and ceases. The unconditioned is what embraces the whole thing. It's where, and the unconditioned is what? Deathless reality. Well, if there's certain like fears and that are just part of human experience. Like being afraid of a bear or something is kind of not neurotic fear. But if you're afraid of a bear where there aren't any, like if you're up in your on the 20th story of a high-rise in your flat, and you're worried about a bear running through your apartment, that's neurotic. It's also like a lot of fears are kind of instilled from they're not intentional. It's just habitual. Like you get them from, say, innocent period of your life when you were an innocent child, and a lot of things you pick up from family and from situation you're in, either directed at you or just part of a family situation. Like if you hear your parents shouting at each other, things like this, that can cause all kinds of kind of neurotic obsessions in life. It's the fear of getting of the people you depend on and look to, kind of everything falling apart. Even when there's nothing particularly falling apart, we can still find ourselves obsessed with the kind of worry that they will. Because you realize what a totally sensitive situation we're in, and then being a human being, you remember, like you have a retentive memory, so you remember things. You have flashbacks, deja vu, and all that. So these things tend to influence us. As we mature, then we begin to put these things in their proper perspective. But we're in a society that doesn't allow us to mature, really. When you think of it, you're not expected to grow up here in Britain. You're expected to kind of be to stay at a certain level emotional development, which which isn't intentional. It's not like it's a plot, but it's just what's happened to a society where material goals and the sense of one's self-importance has become so domineering, so dominating in our lives. Like what we find very ennobling is, like I've seen people, like in the Sangha, hang on to experiences of their life and justify their own inabilities and all their problems through, say, being abused as a child, or having unfortunate experiences, or coming from a bad family, or not being loved, or something like that, and then making that a kind of being obsessed with one sense of with a kind of neurotic obsession that comes from dwelling on that, and then always being a victim, so that they're always placing themselves in this. They seem to always kind of recreate situations where they're always kind of getting that kind of experience again, where they're being criticized or they're being, ostracized or whatever. And then others, you realize who have maybe had been abused as children, but realize they're not going to let that stop them. They're going to that's not going to be an obstacle to their spiritual development. There's a sense of taking the bull by the horns, or whatever, or really, getting beyond this, not just wallowing as a victim of life, and saying, if these things hadn't happened to me, then I would be okay. It's their fault, it's his fault, it's her fault, and if this hadn't happened to me, then I would really be able to do something, but because of that, I'm just this kind of helpless creature. That's neurotic. But the beauty of our human situation lies not, is that no matter what happens to us, no matter how unfortunate or miserable our life experiences might be, it's no obstacle to enlightenment. And that's the obstacle to enlightenment is a selfish views and it's kind of immaturity, of emotional immaturity is the obstacle. If you come from a terrible family, or if you've been a criminal, or none of these things are obstacles to enlightenment. That your mother never loved you, or whatever, or if you've got leprosy or something, that's not an obstacle to enlightenment either. But the sense of me and mine is, and that sense of being life's victim is an obstacle. I think that's one thing that needs to be really encouraged, because like here I see people lack confidence in themselves because their self-view is so dependent on whether people like them, or on praise, or on being accepted, or whatever, that people feel that they and if your whole kind of life is dependent upon being accepted or appreciated or recognized or loved by somebody else, then of course you have no real confidence in yourself. You have to always have that kind of confirmations all the time made. I'm all right, so-and-so says I'm all right. So-and-so said that I'm okay. And in the religious life, for example, I went through a period where I wanted Ajahn Chah to confirm things for me. Where I wanted him to, he's the expert, he's the wise man, he's the sage, and so I wanted him to say, tell me where I am and what I've attained, and or confirm it, kind of certify it, and that. So this was a strong desire to have the authorities that you respect and look to certify you. Because he'd never do that. And he said, making you look at yourself. And he said, there's this technique of meditation in Thailand where they check you go through a kind of interview every day, where the teacher always tells you what stage you're in and how far you've come along on this method, and so some of these monks sometimes would go to Wat Bapong and then they'd say, Ajahn Chah, do you do this? Do you check the mood? Do you check the attainments of us every day? And he says, no. He says, you check it yourself. They say, well, this other place, they always, the teacher always, we always have an interview every day and he tells us. And Ajahn Chah said, no, it's impossible. He said, how do you expect me to know where you are? You can only know where you are. It's true, isn't it? And yet that kind of immaturity in us wants somebody else, wants the expert. Would love to have the Dalai Lama or the Sangha of Thailand or the latest guru or what, come and say, you are an enlightened being. Here's a certificate with a stamp, golden frame around it. Hang it up and they say, I've got the proof. I'm enlightened. In one temple in Bangkok, they used to give you enlightenment certificates. I'll see what I can do for you. But that confidence isn't from ego. It's not like, I'm a good guy, kind of incessant affirmation. But it's through understanding the nature of your mind that you begin to understand why you are the way you are, how your mind works, and what the human situation is. And that's what the Buddhist teachings really point, is an examination, an investigation of the mind and body of our human state, to the point where you really understand how it works, how it operates, its limitations. You know it for what it is, and that then you have the confidence. You don't need to have all kinds of external affirmations or that, because you know what that is. It's just based on desire to have somebody say you're okay, rather than to know exactly the truth of the way it is. So the self-consciousness, the sense of me as an ego, it can easily be offended or upset or hurt by what people say. You can hurt my feelings on the ego plane by insulting me or accusing me of something or criticizing me or whatever, and then I can feel hurt and rejected and so forth. That's on the ego plane of a self-conscious position. But then that which is transcending that ego and self-consciousness is wisdom, and that's where mindfulness is. You can be aware of the feeling of being offended, like somebody says something nasty to me. I can hear it. It's still unpleasant. Somebody says it in anger and with great aversion. You're a sensitive being, so you're picking it up. You're aware of it is nastiness, it's unpleasantness. Now you can react to it either. You can react to it by getting angry and upset by it, or just trying to ignore it and run away from it, or you can actually just observe. It feels this way. To be insulted is this feeling. Then you're reflecting. You're actually transcending the feeling itself and recognizing it for what it is. Then, of course, it is impermanent, so it ceases. You realize its presence, and then you realize its absence. So that is the. In that way, you've kind of you have transcended the ego through objectifying it, seeing it for what it is. Where if we don't do that, then we tend to just reinforce it by reacting. How dare you talk to me like that? No. Where ideals, say if we're talking about ideals, say as a Buddhist monk, it doesn't matter. Say this is an ideal. It shouldn't matter to me what people say about me, because it's not important. I shouldn't be concerned if people criticize me or accuse me of things I haven't done or things like that. Then I shouldn't really mind it. I should be equanimous towards it, indifferent. And then the story about that Japanese story about the Zen monk that was accused of impregnating the village girl, and the village girl had a baby, and she said it was the Zen monk, and the village people all turned against him, said you did this immoral act, and the monk's totally indifferent. He just says "aso" to everything, and then years later the girl admits that it wasn't him, that she just said it was, and so the villagers all go back to the monk and say, "We're sorry about that," and he says, "aso." That's the way I should be. Just that's the ideal, isn't it? To be totally equanimous and not to be reactive to the praise and blame of the society. Now that's okay as long as it's not happening. Then when it happens, so somebody accuses me of doing something like that, and I might say, "Ah, so," but inside I might feel, "Ooh, how dare they? It's terrible, after all I've done, and my reputation is ruined now, and people will feel terribly disappointed, and it's unfair because it's not true, and that girl is a liar, and I'm fed up with Buddhism, and I'm fed up with England, I'm leaving, and so forth. That's then you think, no, I shouldn't think like that. I should just say with our soul forever. And so suppress it all. Those are the two extremes, isn't it? Indulging in anger and resentment, or in trying to suppress it all and just try to keep the stiff upper lip, kind of holding it all down and pretending you don't care. Or, say, the mindful way is to just to use the situation to see, to reflect upon. So that if I'm accused of something, then then there's a willingness to examine the feelings that come up. Either the feeling of how dare they do that, or I shouldn't feel anything. I'm willing to look at you're willing to look at whatever reaction you tend to have as a reaction of your mind. So it is exactly what it is. If I'm being stiff upper lip about it all, then I'm aware I shouldn't really feel anything about this. I should just be able to say, so, and it doesn't matter what people say. You didn't do it. But it doesn't matter what people say, because as long as you know, that's all that matters. That's the ideal. But if you really listen to that, then you begin to see it as you do really care. You're pretending you don't. And you're trying not to. And then the other extreme is, how dare they accuse me of this terrible deed when I didn't do it. But you can also listen to that as something that arises and ceases. And that way you can always use life's experiences for wisdom and strength, and not be. And that is seeing the Dhamma of the situation. Seeing the Dhamma of being blamed for something you haven't done, and is an opportunity to really look at a feeling of indignation or being enraged or whatever, and then these conditions, these reactions can be. Then you're actually letting them go. You're resolving the karmic attachment to that. You're letting it go, and so you find more and more you are moving towards equanimity, towards just being able to take the flow of life as it is. But it's a willingness to really see and examine the things and see them as they are. Through, say, that's what, like the Four Noble Truths is the kind of formula for that kind of insight. Oh yes. I get more praise than I do blame. So then you reflect on that, because praise I like. So it's one can get carried away with that. But that is also, that is equally important to reflect upon. Well, the thing is, whatever, like at first you, say with anger, for example, you don't want to be angry, or you'd like to somebody does something and you have short-tempered, you get enraged. And then you kind of blow up and say things, and you think, oh, I'm not mindful, and I shouldn't have said that. And so you develop a pattern of maybe getting angry and then feeling guilty about it, and then try saying, I'm not going to do that again, and then failing and blowing up, feeling guilty. To develop a pattern, a kind of cyclical pattern. But I've found that wherever you break that cycle is good. Like even if you're not mindful enough to see the anger, and you blow up and say terrible things, at least there's a point in it all when you suddenly feel guilty or worthless, and you can actually start there. And that will dissolve the strength of the whole cycle. Like I used to have to work with the sense of guilt and hopelessness before I could actually be mindful enough to get it before, because of the power of anger. So that's why, and don't despair. Even you can see, if you conceive yourself as being someone who has a bad temper, and then or gets angry, and then you're always tending to make judgments whenever you get angry. That reaffirms this sense of yourself as being an angry person. But if you're reflecting on the cycle, then you're actually kind of weakening it, and that's why even if you make a total fool of yourself, blow up and say the worst possible thing, still don't despair. You can, at that point where you feel totally ashamed and worthless and hate yourself, you can start there. Wherever you catch yourself in that moment where you suddenly realize what you're doing. And that will also weaken the actual fiery anger part. Or jealousies, or greed, lust, things like this. It's all, you see, there's a cycle to it. It's not just kind of an isolated thing. So try to be aware of the cycle, how one thing goes on to the next, and so then you can actually kind of, at points of the cycle, you can be more mindful, and at others. Like when there's a lot of lust, or it's hard to get any mindfulness when the mind's filled with lust. But as you start feeling guilty about it, or getting, that which that is impermanent, then more you're really aware of it, where say it's not as strong, that the actual strength of the passion has diminished, but there's a sense maybe of self-hatred or feeling dirty or whatever, and that point you can actually begin to objectify that more, and then that will weaken. Then the whole cycle will tend to weaken and lose its power to kind of overwhelm you. But as long as you go from, like if you have lustful thoughts, and then you're living you're trying to live by the precepts and live a very moral life, and then you say, oh, I'm such a terrible person, dirty-minded, and you go into kind of self-condemnation. Then and you're developing a pattern that supports the whole cycle. Even hating yourself and looking down on yourself support actually the lustful thinking. A vicious circle. That's why it's hopeless as a thing in itself. When you're looking at it only from the ego, then it's hopeless. But when you're looking at the ego, then you can see, when you know what the ego is, a sense of self-involvement with it, then you can see that what it is, really what it is. You're not trying to say it's something it's not. You're not suppressing, you're not indulging, you're just seeing it for what it is, and that's seeing the Dhamma, seeing the truth of the way it is. In that there's liberation, you see, freedom.